In a time where many game developers, aside from the indie market, either try to make the next live service hit a la Fortnite, or produce massive copy-paste open worlds that lose themselves in repetitive gameplay which makes them feel more like work instead of entertainment, a US developer and a French publisher decide to team up in order to revive a game series that got its last and only entry over 13 years ago. Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 again throws you inside a power armor to defeat the enemies of humanity for the Emperor. But first thing first, after a short tutorial mission we'll come back to later, you are free to explore a ship that works as a hub world where you can team up with up to 2 friends and adjust your equipment, edit your classes and appearance, or select one of the 3 game modes currently available. And while everything can be played solo, all of the game modes felt like they were meant to be played by at least 2 people. Speaking of the game modes, as of now you can choose between the campaign mode that follows a simple linear PvE mission structure, an operations mode that puts you in the role of another squad which fulfills missions alongside the main story, and a PvP game mode where 2 squads of Space Marines or Chaos Marines compete in classic shooter style gameplay modes. The gameplay itself is a great improvement to the first one, which begins with the game's structure that encourages you to play the story mode first. We're supposed to learn the basics, and those are already fantastic, because the game will give you many tools to send the enemies of humanity back to their maker in as many pieces as possible. Starting with the ranged weapons that every Space Marine gets to carry 1 primary and 1 secondary of. The primary weapons, while only being 14 to choose from, and some only being variations of the standard bolter, the basic assault rifle for the Space Marines, they all feel and sound amazing, with my absolute favorite being the melter rifle and its variants, that are pretty much shotguns that shoot fire projectiles. Other than that, besides the plasma incinerator, an energy rifle that can charge up its shot to increase the damage, Warhammer 40k keeps focusing on the basics, and I actually like that. I don't need any fancy weapons or 13 different rifles, especially when they only water down the experience. The secondaries are probably the least exciting part of your loadout. Not only are there just 4 of them, the Neo-Volkite, Bolt Heavy, Bolt and Plasma Pistol, while again feeling and sounding heavy in a positive way, are simply small versions of existing primary weapons. But in the end, the pistols are really just a last resort, and way more often than switching to your secondary, you will use one of the amazing melee weapons. And this is probably my favorite part of the gameplay. It feels just like a turn your brain off power fantasy when you glide through basic mobs with your chainsword. And not gonna lie, I really like that it's playing like Helldivers, but instead of being in danger all the time, you are the danger. On the other hand, calling Space Marine 2 a mindless slasher festival wouldn't do the game justice, because as soon as you encounter some of the stronger foes or even bosses, you also need to utilize your defensive abilities. Like the dodge roll that always looks a bit goofy when a 2 meters tall super soldier dives around on battlefield, or the parry system that when used correctly can unbalance stronger foes, which gives you the option to perform a finishing move. That, in the hours I played so far, I never got tired of trying, because the developers went the extra mile here and put in so many unique ones for every weapon and enemy type. And on top of that, the game includes a system that forces and rewards a more aggressive playstyle. And that is how it manages your health, because while your general health only recovers through medpacks, your sheet can either regenerate over time or through finishing moves. So in some situations, it actually makes more sense to go straight into the action instead of keeping your distance. Now throw in a few explosives, grenades and red barrels into the mix, and you have every way to end your opponents. When you now think, wow, the mechanics sound actually quite extensive for a shooter, then I would agree with you. To be fair, it still is no rocket science, but that is actually a good thing if you ask me. And the other game modes also expand on those mechanics with the addition of character classes, which have a more limited loadout but gain a special ability in return. As of now, you get to choose between 6 different classes. Those are the Assault that has no primary weapon but gets a Thunder Hammer and a jetpack to charge into groups of enemies. The Bulwark that also has no primary weapon but has a Power Sword and a Storm Shield that blocks all damage it faces. The Heavy that has a Heavy Bolter as a primary and can activate a Force Shield around him, called an Iron Halo. The Sniper that gets a full loadout with all 3 weapon slots and the ability to get invisible for a limited amount of time. The Tactical that is the most basic Space Marine with the addition of the Auspex scan that allows you to highlight your opponents for a certain time. And last but not least, the Vanguard that also has a full loadout and a grappling hook that lets you pull yourself towards enemies and stun them as well. Which in my opinion is actually a good way to balance the game and not have a squad of, for example, 5 heavies run around in every lobby. Because in operations mode there's only 1 person that can choose each class, and in the PvP mode there's a maximum of 2 on each side. And yes, all of what I told you so far sounds like everything in this game is very exciting, and mechanics wise this game actually has a lot to offer. And when you look at the presentation, the hordes of enemies and the massive architecture, the game is really good at impressing its players. I too found myself looking around at the massive cathedrals, taking in the beautiful surroundings, but this game has a problem. I played it for less than 20 hours and still faced a lot of repetition. And I would say if I wouldn't have played the multiplayer with friends, it would probably be less than 15 or even 10 hours. Because in the operations mode you had like 6 operations on release, with a new one being added recently, and in the PvP mode you have 3 game modes and 3 maps, so repetition is inevitable. Even the progression system that is actually separated for operations and PvP had nothing to offer that I felt like playing for to unlock. But that might just be me, so if you played the game yourself and are still watching right now, I would really like to know your opinion on the content and the game in general. So if you have the time, I would really appreciate if you could tell me in the comments. I mean, I feel like I got my money's worth, because I had a few fun evenings with my friends, but if you are only here for the campaign, that can easily be finished in around 6 hours, I think you should think twice before buying it at full price. Speaking of the campaign, that's what I want to take a closer look at next, so if you don't want to get spoiled, feel free to skip to the timestamp shown on the screen right now. With that out of the way, the game begins with the protagonist Titus, now known as the Deathwatch Black Shield Nullers, being deployed onto the jungle world Kadaku, as part of a Deathwatch squad, with the mission to launch a virus bomb in order to weaken the Tyranid swarm and turn the tide in battle. But before the team could reach the planet's surface, they get hit by a swarm of flying Tyranids and crash their ship. Titus, who got separated from the others, tries to reunite with his squad but gets heavily wounded in a battle with the Carnifex, a heavily armored Tyranid unit. While Titus was closing with his life, an airship from the Ultramarines emerged from the sky to recover their dying brother's body. Shortly after that, the first division of the Ultramarines, full of elite soldiers including their captain, arrives at Kadaku. They successfully hold off the Tyranids long enough for the Deathwatch soldiers to retreat and leave the planet to the all-devouring Tyranid swarm. In the meantime, the severely wounded former Captain Titus arrives at the ship where he has to undergo the soul-called Rubicon Primaris, which is best described as an upgrade surgery for the quote-unquote old model of Space Marines. The operation is successful and the now enhanced Titus wakes up to the news that he from now on, after a decade, will once again serve as an Ultramarine of the 2nd Division, but now as a lieutenant instead of their captain. Further, he was promised that he is no longer suspected to be under the influence of chaos, and that his dishonorable service in the Deathwatch will be wiped from the records. Even though officially redeemed, Titus was still met with skepticism by some of his brothers, especially by the man who now holds the rank he once possessed himself, Captain Sevastus Acheron, who, despite his doubts, grants Titus his new rank of lieutenant, and by that, the command over his own squad, consisting of Sergeant Gadriel and Brother Sharon, which also grew suspicious of their mysterious new lieutenant, who was asked to keep his past as a captain a secret. Captain Acheron informs Titus that his company is currently fighting to evacuate the remaining humans left on Kadaku, and tasks them to support the Astra Militarum, the regular human military forces, with their mission to regain control over the planet's orbital defense systems so that the Tyranid hive ships can be destroyed and the evacuating forces gain some much needed additional time for their mission. After succeeding in their mission, defeating hordes of Tyranids in the process, Titus and his squad is being tasked with escorting an Archmagus, who refuses to leave until the scientific data from his lab has been retrieved, so the Marines decide to escort him to his research facility. After uploading the data, Nozick takes his leave, but his gunship crashes into a Tyranid-infested area, and Titus' squad again rush to his aid, only to find everyone to be dead already, and to top it all off, after investigating further, the group notices the ship's crew did not fall prey to the Tyranids, and instead was slain by forces of chaos. The mission then comes to a sudden end when a mysterious object causes Titus to lose his consciousness. After coming back from his slumber, Titus wastes no time to inform his captain about the occurrences on Kadaku and his concern about the discovered traces of chaos. Despite the lieutenant still not being in the best shape, his squad is ordered to locate Nozick's apprentice on the hive planet Averex, so that he can continue where his master's studies found a forced ending. Following another successful reduction of the Tyranid population, the super soldiers reach a facility of the Adaptus Mechanicus. At their destination, they not only find the location of their target, they also come across some documents that reveal the truth behind the so-called Project Aurora that Nozick contributed to, which happens to be the construction of a warp-based weapon that utilizes a reconstructed version of a Chaos artifact Titus destroyed 100 years ago during the events of the first game. Having experienced the terrible consequences of the artifact's use, Titus takes the first chance he gets to confront his captain about the news, and demanded the immediate cancellation of the project. But he refuses and informs his lieutenant that the current ruler of the Ultramarines, Primarch Gilliman, ordered the weapon's construction himself. Back to their mission again, the Space Marines find themselves confronted by the Chaos Marines called the Thousand Suns. After rearranging the facial structure of many of those traitors, they finally arrive at their target's location. On their way back, the now former pupil reveals to his squad mates that Titus used to be the division's captain and was believed to be dead after holding the artifact at the end of the first game, which further grows the distrust they already had in their new lieutenant. Back from their mission, Titus once more reveals his concerns to their captain and asks him to inform their chapter master about the truth behind Project Aurora. But his request gets declined again, this time because the relay needed to transmit a message is overrun by Tyranids, and all messages are being blocked by the Chaos Forces anyway. Titus then immediately offers to regain control over the relay himself, while another squad would eliminate the creature leading the Tyranid swarms, which the captain agrees to. On their way to their objective, the super soldiers experience the other squad's success firsthand when the Tyranids they fought suddenly lose control and stop being a threat. Inside the relay, the group comes across Neoma, a so-called astropath that is capable of transmitting messages throughout the galaxy. She offers to send the message for them, but as soon as she begins the transmission, she begins accusing Titus of being a traitor who wants to lure Calagar into a trap, which results in Gadriel attacking his lieutenant. But when Sharon shot Neoma and revealed that the Chaos Sorcerer Lord Imura tricked them, all of them focused their aggression on the newly recognized threat, forcing Imura to flee. Following their return, Titus is informed that the Chaos Marines are attacking the cemetery world Demirium, where Project Aurora takes place. Before making their way to Demirium himself, Titus' squadmates decide to make up with him by expressing their newfound trust in their lieutenant. After fighting through dozens of Chaos traitors, the team finally arrives at the location of Project Aurora, where they learn that Demirium actually is a tomb world of another species called the Necrons, whose technology the Mechanicus used in the development of the warp weapon. Imura tries to interfere with the constructions of Project Aurora, but ends up being transported to the realm of Chaos himself. But this turns out to be another trick when Imura returns, revealing that he manipulated the Mechanicus to reconstruct the artifact for himself. He then kills the prodigy Luis and takes off with the reconstructed energy source. Back on the surface, the Marines find a Necron obelisk that emerged from the ground and opened a giant portal which allows thousands of Chaos troops, including a so-called Lord of Change, a giant bird-like creature, to arrive at the former Necron planet. A ridiculous cinematic battle begins and the Ultramarines come up with the plan to destroy the smaller pillars, fueling the main one with energy. On their way, the squad almost falls victim to the overwhelming amount of Chaos troops, but gets saved by Space Marine reinforcements led by the chapter master of the Ultramarines, Marnios Kalga himself. After destroying the last pillar, the Ultramarines begin fighting and pushing back the armies of Chaos, and Imura, together with the Lord of Change, use a portal to flee into the realm of Chaos, unleashing a spell that seemingly froze everyone engaged in the battle in time, except Kalga and of course Titus and his squad. The chapter master immediately rushes after Imura and the beast, with the other three following shortly after. Reunited with their leader, the four manage to defeat the Lord of Change while Imura tries to make the power of the artifact his own. But thanks to the distraction of the chapter master, Titus gains access to the artifact and manages to reverse the polarity of its power, causing Imura to explode and pushing back the forces of Chaos, leaving the Ultramarines victorious. After awakening outside of the Chaos realm, Titus is met by the cheerful faces of his brothers and Kalga himself, who ask Titus, who has proven himself worthy, to join him to fight along his side. And this marks the end of Space Marine 2's story. And while I think the around 6-hour long campaign is by far the best part of the game, I have to admit that I never really paid that much attention to the story itself. I instead found myself busy being impressed by the surroundings, the architecture and the visual effects. It literally felt like playing a high-budget Warhammer movie. So, first of all, welcome back to everyone who skipped the story part. Now, would I recommend to buy Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2? And my answer is no. If you hate feeling like an absolute badass defeating hordes of enemies surrounded by amazing sceneries and architecture on diverse planets with up to 2 friends. But if you would like to play a game that feels like a shooter from an era without any nonsense, even though the combat is complex enough to not make it a simple run and gun show, this game is a no-brainer. I really enjoyed my time with the game and I think many of you will as well. Just keep in mind that the game has one problem, and that is the lack of content after the story mode. Especially the very minimalistic PvP mode is a bit disappointing. So while I really liked anything the game has to offer, and I think I got my money's worth, but if you watch it now, I would really like to know what you think of the game. So feel free to tell me in the comments. And of course, thank you for watching, and if you like what you see, maybe consider subscribing. And I hope to see you next time.